Good morning, fellow humans. I hope everyone's having a lovely day today. I feel compelled to have a conversation with you today. As I've said before, this mode of communication is new to me, and I have ideas. I've talked about them in the past a little bit. But there were a couple of things that have happened in the past number of days, even yesterday, that have kind of prompted this conversation that I would like to have with you today. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do, right, is to just act, react, document, and share my perspective, document my perspective. What the world does with it is, not my problem. And my job is to just show up and do the work that I have intended to do. And so part of that is that in recent events, there were a couple of things that really triggered this thought that I needed to have this conversation for no other reason than to just get it out of my head at the end of the day. But it kind of delves into a little bit of my past. I have to kind of do some, I have to make sure that I have to establish my bona fides, I suppose, or at least to make sure that I can communicate in a good faith manner, and also demonstrate that my opinion has at least some degree of standing, some degree of legitimacy of experience. So it's hard to actually start, to be honest, because some of these topics I have never talked about at all with anyone. But the circumstances are such that I think it's important to share and to document at least my perspective. And why is it important, right? I mean, everybody's got an opinion, and part of my job, of course, is to balance a whole bunch of people's opinions on what should be done, both from a business standpoint, et cetera, but also from a moral standpoint. It's actually quite surprising that in my profession, how often your morals get, and your integrity and your principles are tested. And in information services, which is where the majority of my career has been focused, I'm a leader in the IT community, in my IT community, and it's really, morality is a very important topic. It's very timely. Integrity is extremely important. Privacy, there's a whole bunch of concerns and things that if you are also an information professional, I think that really should be a portion of, a part of a professional's ongoing education, is to understand, focus, and interact, and contribute to the conversation about modern morality and integrity, etc. Anyway, so there were two things in the news that kind of prompted me to have the desire to share kind of some of my experiences as a young person, and that's what I was going to say. Why would an opinion matter? I mean, really, at the end of the day, I'm just screaming into the void. I'm not really screaming, but you get the point. And so why is it just a matter of not just noise? It's because we all have different experiences. And only a fool doesn't learn from others' experiences, whether that be something, an anecdote to avoid, or one to mimic, or one to eschew. So whatever, the point is that we all have different experiences in life and different backgrounds, and we all have certain innate perspectives that are useful to our fellow creatures, because we as mortals, we can't live each other's lives, and only a fool doesn't learn from the people around him. So I'm doing these and sharing these things not for self-aggrandizement or any other purpose other than that I think that it's an acknowledgement, at least from my psychological health, that my opinion matters, and there is space for it. And in terms of generational politics, generational psychology, etc., that's a difficult thing for someone like me. You can scoff at that, and I don't really care. but that's the truth. The other piece to that, I think, is that I have an opinion, or I have a perspective to share future generations, future people that aren't me, that have not lived my life, and I think there are. I think it's important for us all, as intellectuals, as individuals, as self-sovereign individuals that are responsible for our own selves, to share our experiences and to learn from each other. Anyway, how does all that tie into these two kind of triggers that I'm in, or these two events that really have made me want to share some of my details of my family, of my past, etc. Well, the biggest one, there's two of them. One, and the most overarchingly, can be summed up by our president's, a phrase that our president used yesterday in addressing the leaders of the free world on a continent that the sons and daughters of liberty have shed blood and done atrocities and scarred ourselves and for generations in the pursuit of the support of liberty. Yesterday, our duly elected president, ours duly elected president, stood in front of the free world and basically, let's see, it's not a very complex quote, but here it is. Sometimes you need a dictator. There is no context that makes that right. There is no context that does not make that a statement of declaration. And you can couch it however you want. You can pretend that it's a joke. You can give all these benefit of the doubt. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the proclivity for the guilty to assuage their guilt by altering the worldview at all costs, altering their worldview at all costs, so that they are not responsible. But at the end of the day, you are responsible. We are responsible. The citizenry of the United States chose this leader. And yes, I, as an information systems and a practitioner of my craft and an understander of technology, there's a lot of debates on whether that it was a decision of consent or not. But at the end of the day, we made a decision and we gave this individual the opportunity to represent us and state in front of the world by his actions and the actions of his people that sometimes you need a dictator. An American president. Now, America's a big place. I get it. My idea of America is not necessarily your idea of America, right? That's what the Constitution is for, so that we can have disagreements in a function and a form that that keeps us from killing each other, and that can come to the best consensus possible. That's what compromise is. That's what politics is, etc. And for 250 years on the dot, that's been at least, well, I'm not going to say that because history is very complicated, right? I'm not going to say what I was going to say. The point is that a more perfect union is and should be the goal, and that union is not a dictatorship. nor should it ever, ever be a dictatorship, especially in times of conflict, especially in times of conflict. Now, we can debate on that, and I would like to, but that's not really what I want to talk about now. The fact, though, that we, who used to be the leader of the free world, our leader, stood in front of the peers, our national peers, our international peers, the rest of the world, our enemies, etc., and said that statement. There's no way to spin this, guys. It's your fault. It's not. These individuals are who they are. You can rail at politics. You can rail at the politicians. You can say how terrible they are, blah blah blah. That this team is good and this team is bad, and it's all crap, right? It's all crap. We all know it, but we tend to want to. We are apologists of our own delusions. That's one part. Now, in that construct, though, the most important thing for me, the most striking thing for me, is how we got here. And that's where my perspective starts to come in, because there is no way that we can talk about this rise of authoritarianism, this direct and belligerent attack on the Constitution. Spin it how you like. You're not going to win that argument. And a good faith argument in the front of the court of law, you know what's going on. You know what's going on. Your gut tells you. Either that or you're completely delusional, or you're incapable of understanding anything. You're a child, right? There's a lot of children in our body politic. That is very true. And I want to be clear. Like I am also naive. I have colleagues and friends who have different perspectives than I do, especially considering public service. And yes, a lot of times I don't understand the sausage making. I do understand the reality of the uniparty system that we have and how it exhibits. I understand. I get that, but I don't get that. I mean, there's a lot of things in my worldview that. Point is I also try to drink my own Kool-Aid, and I also very much value other people's opinions, especially, well, I wouldn't say only, but especially if it's in a good faith, which is my goal. My goal is that we treat each other as humans, and we profit from our diversity. So on the backdrop, that's kind of the big overarching thing, the fact that we are creating a quasi-confederate, neo-fascist, theocratic technocracy. Like, I mean, that's crazy. That it honestly sounds like a conspiracy. Now, that leads me into the second thing that kind of has triggered my desire to have this conversation this morning. Recently, there were a group of protesters, and the truth will always come out. But the premise is that they were a bunch of crazy protesters who assaulted, well, quote, assaulted, unquote, well, disturbed. You get my point? Like, we don't know what the thing is what the actual truth of the matter was, but the principle of the matter is being utilized for propagandic purposes, and that is that a group of crazy protesters, who are trying to be painted as the devil, etc., interrupted a sacred church function and must be therefore punished because they hate God, or some variation accordingly. This triggers a lot of, this is why, one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of start documenting my perspective, because I think in terms of this topic, in terms of the crossroads between religion and politics, especially American religion and politics. I think I have a unique perspective that can be shared. In order to share that, though, you gotta kind of understand where I'm coming from, because otherwise it's just vacuum. It's opinion in a quasi vacuum. So I have a very intimate relationship with what is colloquially referred to as the church. In this case, I think I'm talking about the conglomerate, the aggregation of a significant number of sects and denominations that can be colloquially referred to as Americanized evangelicalism, even though they don't really like internally, a lot of these sects hate the word evangelical. A lot of these people are not self-aware. They're not self-aware of church history. They're not aware of what they are participating in. All they're aware of is what they feel, what they believe, what they choose to believe, and what they get out of it. And that's not bad per se, right? I mean, we all do the same thing. I go to the movies for comfort and for clarity, and I do things. I have spiritual practices myself that give me a great deal of comfort, and there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's nothing wrong with you, honestly, being a part of a cult. Cult is an interesting word, and I've got also another. I mean, that's a whole nother topic that I would love to get into because of my background. So let me kind of describe to you let me kind of give you some baselines. I am the first day that I was in church, and when I say church, I mean Independent Baptist, premillennial fundamentalist Baptist church, with ties going back past the Civil War, and that with ties and with purposes that go back even farther than that. I've got a lot to say about kind of that topic, but let's kind of focus, because this is too big of a camel to swallow unless we try to focus a little bit. And in this instance, I'm trying to kind of share why my kind of opinion has a certain degree of validity. Anyway, so first day at church, I was 4 days old. My father and my mother, my father graduated seminary at Baptist Bible College in 1972, 72. And I was born in 71. And this is why kind of I'm trying to share my experiences, because my generation is my father's generation and his parents. We are always a continuation of what comes before, right? And so we lose a lot on this generational friction. And some of that wisdom and some of that perspective is important to preserve and is important to understand, so that future generations, meaning like the people that will be in charge, the millennials, the people that will be replacing, baby boomer politicians, and honestly, what is referred to as the greatest generation politicians. I mean, they're still there. These individuals are still running the country. People like me, there aren't that many of them in a certain degree of power, and that's normal. There's always kind of a cycle and an ebb and flow on power, especially on political power. Different topic. So my folks, they have their own backgrounds. They're quite interesting in and of themselves. My mother was a radical. She would be considered a radical at this time, she was a McCarthyist. She was very heavily involved in that counterculture movement. I don't even know what We'll talk later about the nomenclature we'll need to use. But, you know, I mean, she spent her youth burying guns in the California desert to prepare for the eventual communist takeover when Kennedy and all those guys were going to kind of give the world, the New World Order was going to come into play, and it was imminent. That was my mother's youth. My father's youth was interesting and with ties to some much deeper American history, which I would love to converse about, but it's too big to talk about right now. But suffice it to say that he was the perfect fodder for what we would call radicalization today. And he became, you know, he went to Baptist Bible College in '72. Well, he graduated in '72. And I was born in '73. And so my father's and my family's for the last, well, even past that, for the last 4 generations, since before the Civil War, my family's profession has been religion. You can call it service, and clearly they do, and clearly there is service involved. I call myself a chaplain when it is appropriate. I like to think of myself a little bit as like an agnostic street preacher. Like I'm fascinated by. Anyway, point is that I have been steeped in that culture and behind the curtain culture of that culture for my entire life. And it's interesting because in '71 this book was published. Now, as a pseudo-intellectual, as an amateur historian and a pseudo-intellectual myself, a lot of times you talk about patterns of behavior or refinements. And this is a function of what we are living in today. It is also a continuation of a purpose. And that purpose is tied to things even before the Civil War in the course of American history. And I want to talk about some of those things, and they are absolutely fascinating, but we got to start somewhere. Anyway, I read this book as a child, yeah, and some of the, let me put it this way. When I read the Project 2025 manifesto, it was clear and evident where all of that was coming from, because it was coming from my youth. It was coming from the purposes of my family. I know where that is coming from. A lot of it is tied with the lost cause mentality, which is tied to the churches. At the end of the day, at the end of the Civil War, when you had to find a way to, when you had to find a reconciliation, I'm not ready for that conversation. Sorry. Anyway. So I've been involved in the church for a long time. As a youth, I was a canonical preacher's kid. My father, started churches, was involved in the seminary, the ministry, as he called it, his entire life, certainly his entire adult life, until the day that he died. I helped him go through the gates of Valley of the Shadow of Death many times. My family, basically, there's a lot of things about how my parents structured my education and my experience and my upbringing, which was fueled by, I'm the first of their children. It was fueled by their ideology. It was fueled by the need for a practical expression of their belief systems. At the end of the day, I grew up in a evangelical death cult. And you can be angry about that all you want. I would love to debate, and I would love to debate a good faith argument about many of these topics. But that's the problem. You can't find anyone who's going to discuss these things, these topics in good faith, or at least in having a certain degree of self-awareness. Because I've been all my life, I've been looking for that. And my father tried. Like, he was, he taught in seminary. He had a doctorate in theology. He wrote theses that were used to train others in this mythos, in their agenda. And anyway, the point is, I'm already half an hour into this, but the point is that I've got skin in that game. In fact, I've got skin in pretty much every aspect of American evangelical religious life, to the point that, how shall I put this? Well, setting the truth free is important, right? So I have experienced the church all the way from the top to the bottom. I've been to so many preachers' conferences, so many. I've seen the good and the bad and the ugly. I've seen the reasons why people think that it's a good institution. I've been sexually abused twice, and once, and just so I can speak legitimately in a broad spectrum. That abuse wound up, being abused by someone in the family, and then abused by someone in the cults. Basically, so I guess I could I could speak definitively or speak experientially on a broad spectrum of abuse, especially when it comes to the church. Independent churches and sects are in some ways more insidious in this way than larger organized religions, such as the Catholic Church or the Methodist Church or the Presbyterians, people with an organization that you can point at. A lot of these evangelical, Southern Baptist, fundamentalist, death cult groups are very segmented. They're very independent. I mean, church splits create whole new sects. Like that's the problem, and that's the technique, right? Because it's like in some ways it's like a guerrilla cell group. Whereas the older versions of religious control, which were more centrally controlled, it's much easier to kind of point at and say, oh yes, well, you can make jokes as priests raping children, and everyone knows what you mean by a priest. But these segmented sects who enjoy the freedoms and the protections of the law and are not held accountable to anybody but themselves, ergo God, they're very difficult to even speak about, right? Because it's always, oh, well, it's not my church. Well, it's not my pastor. It's not my college. It's not my seminary. It's not my XYZ. So I'm completely absolved of the problem. That's one of the reasons why the independent Baptist movement existed. That's why they eschewed, like in some ways, they eschewed Southern Baptist kind of central. Anyway, American church history is a crazy, crazy topic, and I would love to get into that. What does that all mean? What that means is that I've seen all of this a lot of times before, and it doesn't take a lot of sexual abuse, for instance, to understand what the intent is of a new abuser. You can see it, you can feel it, you know it. You know it. And so the current kind of iteration of this the refinement is what I call it, of the Project 2025, of the, oh, by the way, I was born in 73, same year as the Heritage Foundation. What I'm trying to say is that my father is dead, and the people, I loved my father, to be clear. He was a wonderful man. I will never cast aspersions upon that. He was a moral man, as far as that goes. He was also a true believer, and that caused him real problems in his organization, in his cult, because he was a true believer. And he did believe, and that created a lot of conflict for him. And that actually created a lot of problems for me, for my family, because the intent is that he was an onward Christian soldier kind of guy. Like he was supposed to be and was trained to be a sergeant or a captain of the New World Order, of a new Christian nation, which is exactly what they preached during the Confederacy. Now, there's nuance to that statement, and I don't have time to go through it, but we should, because at the end of the day, I don't have any children, and my experience in life will go away and become conjecture. So that's why it's important for us, the people that have lived through some of these things, to witness and to share our experiences. And of course they're subjective. Of course they are. Of course I cannot divorce myself from my own experiences, but I can intellectually and compassionately understand my fellow human. And compassion, I have learned compassion. I have learned compassion. The people that sexually abuse me are dead. And there is no such thing as justice. But I have learned compassion in the hardest possible ways. And I have walked my life, walked my path with as much boldness as I could, and with as much of an open heart as I could, and with an understanding that if you got to put a man down, at least you should be courteous. At least you should acknowledge his humanity. And having compassion for a monster, having compassion for monsters, is part of what I was taught by my religious upbringing, but not in the way that people like to think about. Anyway, back to this. This is fascinating. Fascinating book. In 1971, it was carpet bombed into the religious communities. And it basically is a conspiracy tract. It's a conspiracy tract. The reason why I bring it up is that it's fascinating, because these kinds of things overlaid over Project 2025, overlaid over what is going on in the world today, you begin to see the pattern. You begin to see the refinement of the pattern. You begin to see the lost cause movement. You begin to see the continuity of effort to moralize the undefendable. And we're doing it again today. The second thing that has prompted some of these conversations that I want to say, the second thing about this video is the outrage that a group of individuals would protest a church. That is disingenuous. In fact, the church, as is being used in this context, the church is one of the problems. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be a politically powerful group without dealing with the consequences of your politics. I don't want people to be burning churches down. I want people to be courteous to each other, even to those individuals that think that the goddamn world is 6,000 years old, and that the world was saved by some dude and his sons and a big wooden boat. Like, it's irrational. I'm sorry, guys, it's irrational. The only way that you can keep that worldview in your mind is by magical thinking. And what it really boils down to is this, and listen, my father and I, one of the things that we bonded with, one of the things that I find the most precious, and honestly, one of the best gifts that he had ever given me, was we used to entertain each other by debating philosophy and religion. And he was an excellent, excellent foil, because he wrote books upon apologetics. He wrote theses to be used to train the next generation of Christian soldiers. He was in amongst them, Charlie, and he was respected. So I come from an informed and an exercised view, is what I'm trying to say. And my father desperately wanted me to believe, and I get it, and I tried really hard. And there's a lot of really interesting experiences that I would like to share about that, especially with my own journey of dealing with the fallout and dealing with the realities of life, and learning and surpassing my father in many ways. I don't like saying that, because I want to respect him, but the best the best compliment of a teacher is that his student surpasses him in his understanding. I know more about the world than my father did, and I think that that's a good thing. And I think that my father was proud of me, and that's also good. But my father was also a cult leader. And he was also delusional in his worldview. And there are also consequences. And one of the consequences was that he and his ilk, it's a weird word, he and his compatriots refined the message over time and adapted it in accordance with what they could gain from the political worldview at large. I got a lot to say about the Heritage Foundation. This is not a Heritage Foundation publication. This is before the Heritage Foundation. This is before. But it's all there. The patterns, the manipulations, this is a terribly written book. It really is. And it's insane, because the interesting part about history, and then again, the reason why I'm trying to share, is that, this is all based upon a viewpoint of politics that was in and of itself a delusion. It was delusional. It was a self-serving delusion for some people, but for others, it was a tool. And that's where the problems start to arise. Because my father was a true believer. He helped push this agenda. He also chose, because he was behind the curtain. He was behind the curtain. I was behind the curtain. I went to preachers' conferences. I know who these individuals are. I knew the type of individual. I knew those kinds of predators. I knew. And now they have refined their message, and it was the perfect time to push the agenda, and they found themselves a dark horse, and they rode that thing to power for their own agenda. As a death cult, you got the true believers like my father, and you got the charlatans like the vast majority of the rest of what we refer to as the clergy. When I was a young man, my father was taught in a seminary, and I had a unique viewpoint in that I got to see these, these future church leaders as they experienced their origin stories. And I've got some things to say about that. And there's a reason why preachers' kids tend to be screwed up. It's a trope, but it's a real one, because it's a function. This is a terrible thing to say, and it's going to get people upset if someone ever looks at this. It's a pattern of abuse. It is child abuse. Some of what I'm talking about is canonically child abuse, and we can debate that. That's a great topic for debate, because there are plenty of people who are going to not like that. Whatever. I'm not. It's not up to me to convince you, right? It's up to me to bear witness, and I would love to debate that. And I would also love to debate whether, on the whole, whether these religious practices are good or bad for our species. It's a big topic. Anyway, here's my central point. For those people clutching their pearls, saying, "Oh my Lord, oh how terrible! The black and brown people are at the doors, trying to storm our sacred church." Sacred church indeed. The church in America has been used as a refuge for those who wear hoods since they've worn hoods. There's a reason why we as a nation forced them to put the hoods on. Before then, they were in the pulpits without the hoods. Before we forced them to their knees because they betrayed the Constitution. They were in the church, manipulating young men and women like my father and my mother to do their killing for them. And call it the will of God. That's the true face of evil, whether you like it or not. Fine. You got your own opinions. You got your own experiences. I would love to have and share those, because I want to learn too. I want to learn how, in my own life, the people that I looked up to as a child, the people that gave me hope of science and intellect, that gave me some measure of comfort, the adults that are now old men and women that are marching to the fascist drum. I want to learn how that happened. I want to learn how the people in my life that I grew up thinking were moral, intellectual, and righteous individuals became tools for evil. I want to know, I want to learn how these individuals can look at themselves in the mirror and call themselves righteous, while black and brown people and citizens now are being destroyed for their autocratic, theocratic fantasies, their colonialist, neo-Confederate, recycled pablum. Nothing of this is new. You think there's... Nothing of this is new. Why did we go into Venezuela first? Why did they go into Venezuela first? There's a reason. There's a historical precedent. It's a pattern. It's a strategy. It is. Why is this happening? It's a strategy. Why is Project 2025 what it is? Because it's a refinement, specifically refined to manipulate those people that I grew up thinking were free moral agents, people of integrity, patriots, people that taught me, that forced me in Christian private school every day to say the Pledge of Allegiance to my nation. They also forced me to pledge allegiance to a Christian flag because they were Christian soldiers, just like they were in the Confederacy. There's a continuity of history here, and if you can see the patterns, it doesn't take a lot. Project 2025 has its roots in the impulses and the message that my father was radicalized on, my mother was radicalized on. It's the same thing with a few tweaks for the modern audience. And you can debate all you want, you can have your own opinions, you can put your blinders on, you can call yourself patriots, but at the end of the day, America is falling because of Christians. And your God told you to take ownership of your actions. Now, your pastor told you you could lay it all on the altar, right? Give yourself to Jesus. Lay it all to Jesus' feet. It's all Jesus. Just follow Jesus. Everything's about Jesus. Jesus this, Jesus that. Why? Why? Why is faith necessary? And how is that faith being manipulated? Because faith, not by itself, I mean, it's a virtue. Faith is a virtue. But like all things, it can be used against you. It can be tarnished. It can be tainted, especially by the powerful, by the manipulative, against the ignorant. They want you ignorant. They want you ignorant. That's why you go to church. That's why those words are not anointed. They're not God's words. They're man's words to manipulate other men. And you're the fool who bought it. Now, sure, there's comfort in it. Sure, there's many, many anecdotes. I've lived them, I've learned them, I've seen them. My father helped a lot of people navigate and recover from abuse, from chemical dependencies, from horrible things in life. Listen, my father had a very, in my opinion, had a unique viewpoint upon the world. Yeah, it's pragmatic, very pragmatic in its way. He wanted to make sure that I saw the truth of what humans were. And so I spent a lot of time in homeless shelters helping. I spent a lot of time engaging with him in what he referred to as his ministry, and he was ministering to people. There was no question about that. There's no question that he impacted and affected many people's lives in a very positive way. No question whatsoever. But to what end? My father was a true believer. He thought he was doing God's work. Whether he did or didn't, okay. His organization had nothing to do with God. His mythos was created. It was created on purpose. It was created after the Civil War. This is church history. You can debate it all you want. It's part of it. It's documented. We don't like it. That's why we keep trying to aggrandize cultural heritage against truth. People don't get it. They don't understand, like, for instance, the topic of, there's all kinds of these topics, but the topic of, Confederate monuments. those Confederate monuments were there. There are pieces of propaganda that were created long after the fact. Robert Lee's life is used just as much as Jesus' life, and for just as nefarious the purpose. Robert Lee was a traitor. He betrayed the Constitution. He betrayed the Constitution, and I maybe Grant made a mistake by forcing the United States to give him clemency. And if you don't understand history, I'm not, go do your homework before you start trying to debate me on this. Because that's good faith argument, right? Opinion is meaningless. Let's have a real conversation here. Point is, now that the propaganda, they're trying so desperately to engineer a scapegoat, trying so desperately to find purchase on them being righteous, because that's how all of this works. You gotta have righteous. You gotta make sure that your controlled flock thinks that they are righteous. And how do they do that? Lay it all on the altar of Jesus. Because I'm an onward Christian soldier and I'm doing what God tells me. No, you're doing what you want to under the guise and the salve of a religious mythology created whole cloth so that rich Southern gentlemen could live with themselves. That's what you are, whether you like it or not. And you twist yourselves into pretzels so many crazy, crazy ways, but you can't, it's indefendable. It is logically indefendable. It is spiritually indefendable. It is morally indefendable. But we kind of whitewash it all, right? America is a Christian nation. How ludicrous of a statement is that? You have no concept of what actually happened if that is what you believe. And if you do believe that, you should use that as evidence to the fact that you have been sold a bill of goods. And you, as an adult, as a citizen of the United States, who has responsibility to educate themselves and a civic duty to make the right choices, a civic duty that was given to you based upon a philosophy and a way of being which comes from the Enlightenment, not from your scriptures, not from the historically and culturally important book, which is referred to as the Bible. So, in the next few weeks and months, my expectation would be that the propaganda machine, because they do it all the time, like this is, religious persecution the image of that has been used many, many times since Paul, who used it as a propaganda tool for his new religion. It's been used many times, and it's going to be used again in the coming weeks and months. You're going to see the propaganda machine, because that's the only thing they can grab onto, because the patriots that are in the streets are doing the right thing. They are being constrained. They are constraining themselves because of their moral clarity and because of their integrity. Will that hold? I don't know. There's a whole bunch of stupid idiots in the world, and also there are a lot of passionate young men and women who may not be able to live in your world. there are a lot of people who cannot live in a theocratic dictatorship, who must not, who will not, who will do everything in their power to make sure that they don't. Hence the Constitution. America is not a Christian nation. America is a nation where Christians have the liberty to exist and to be respected and to be given courtesy. And when that social contract is broken, both parties, like any contract, have unfortunate options. So stop hiding behind your pulpits. Stop hiding behind your church spires. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with yourself. You know those churches that you're hiding in? A whole bunch of them down south that were built on the blood and with the hands of slaves. That's the truth. My father had a lot of spiritual, for lack of a better term, heroes. Unfortunately, most of those heroes of his were Confederate apologists. And in past that, they were apologists of a different ilk. And now they're in power. Now they're hiding their hoods. They hid their hoods until they tricked you, the citizenry, in your ignorance and your apathy into their worldview. And you gave them the power because, oh, they're good. They're Christian folks. Oh, you know, the current leader is a tool of God. No, you put him there. You put him there. This is your fault. Take ownership of your mistakes, like a man, like a woman, like an adult. Take ownership of it. I do. I take ownership. I take ownership of the fact that maybe I didn't do something enough. Maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I didn't do anything politic enough to share my story, to push the agenda of enlightenment, to push back the darkness. Maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I wasn't smart enough. Maybe I didn't read this enough to understand my enemy enough. The enemy of the Constitution, the enemy of the right and the good. Maybe I didn't do enough. I take ownership of that in my apathy. That's the nature of the world now. The World War II order is gone, whether you like it or not. American ascendancy, righteous ascendancy is gone. We squandered it. It's done. That blood on Omaha Beach is squandered. It's squandered. The blood of patriots is squandered because of my generation, because of my father's generation. We have Confederates in power who are talking about, what was it again? Oh, it's a very difficult quote. Let me read it again. Sometimes you need a dictator. That's your fault. Because you chose to be blind of your own inadequacies. You chose to not question your own self. You chose to not question the fact that, oh no, I'm not a bigot. I'm not a bigot. I'm not racist. I'm not racist. You chose to say that, while your actions did the opposite. And now the world stage knows it. And now we will suffer the consequences. It's a done deal. It's a done deal. So, You lay it all on the altar to Jesus. Your Jesus, whatever you want it. But at the end of the day, stop using your religion to hide from your responsibilities. That's it. And in the coming days, when you see the flood of propaganda trying to utilize the triggers that have been placed inside you to get mad about and to defend the cross and to feed into that opiate of self-righteous indignation, that opiate, that bump of martyrdom. When you start to see all of that, look at yourself in the mirror. Stop for a second. Ask yourself, where is this coming from? What do I mean by persecution? Can I legitimately claim that in my affluence, in my orgy of freedom, the ability to believe whatever crazy stuff you want to believe? Your sanctioned ability to mutate the minds of your children so that they cannot understand the world? That's on you. Consequences are on us. And when the leader that we put in place, who's a hand puppet for the true enemy, you gotta know when you are embarrassed or when your sons and daughters die, it's your fault. There's no way to get around it. That's the problem with self-rule. The buck stops with you. Politicians, yeah, you're totally right. Politicians are what they are, and they will always be what they are. Just like bankers, just like pastors, they're always going to be that way. That's the landscape of your reality. You're in charge of your reality. You're responsible anyway. That's another whole topic. But at the end of the day, the atrocities that are currently happening to our fellow citizens, the loss of our moral standing in the world, whatever that was, it's on you. We chose it. So, what are you going to do about it? Well, either you're going to challenge yourself as a free moral agent, as a responsible citizen, and question your own viewpoints, or you're going to go back to the well and get that bump and stand in front of that preacher who may or may not be your enemy, and you're going to protect him as he feeds you what you want to hear, which is that you are correct, and you are righteous, and you are moral, and Jesus loves you. So grow the fuck up. Take responsibility for it. That's it. It's difficult for me, personally, to mourn the loss of the image of you as being a worthy person, as being someone who has moral compass, as being someone who has a certain degree of moral authority. I mourn that. I mourn the loss of you heavily. There's an emptiness in my heart for the people that I thought were good. There's a darkness in me where there used to be love and respect for individuals. because of your choices. Because you're the one that's espousing, sometimes you need a dictator. Because you're giving yourself the benefit of the doubt while you're persecuting others that happen to not look like you. That's not a moral act. That's not what your Jesus would have said. You got to get righteous. You got to get on your fucking knees and you got to pray to your God for some forgiveness for the evils that we have all been part of. And you got to do better. You got to do better. You're an American. You must do better. Even when those around you don't. That's why those people died on Omaha Beach. That's why so many people died during the Cold War that we don't know about. That's why my mother was completely convinced that she was doing the right thing when she was preparing to fight the commies in Southern California. It's ludicrous. Wake up. You're an American. Fucking act like one. You got it? Like I said, agnostic street preacher. Got to take ownership of what we are, right? I'm a lot of other things, and I don't want you to be my enemy. I want you to be an American. But if you are, if you have chosen to put the hood on, and I know plenty who have, if you have chosen your path, okay. I respect the choice. You do what you got to do, and I'll do what I got to do. That's the reality of human combative behavior. That's the reality of the Civil War. That's the reality of life. Let's not make the same mistakes we did in the past. These echoes are echoes of our fathers' sins. You have access to wisdom of the ages, of the world. You live in a world where you can pick up a device. The thing that I'm speaking to you on is the oracle of all human understanding. Yes, of course there's a bunch of bullshit in it. Of course there is. Human understanding. 2 words. Of course there's bullshit. Of course you don't know. Oh, I don't know who to believe. Yeah. What are you, 12? That's what an adult is. You got to learn who and how to believe. You have to discern fact, truth, and fiction, and you have to own your own morality. Stop outsourcing it to someone who is manipulating you, because it's a fucking bump when you don't have to deal with the consequences of your actions by simply saying, lay it all on Jesus. Oh yes. Oh, and in payment, now I gotta be a Christian soldier. What a horrible phrase. What a horrible phrase. Do you know where that came from? Its modern application? Do you know why you sing that in church, Onward Christian Soldier? Do you know where that mentality came from? It sure as hell did not come from morality. It did not come from God. Whatever that is. It came from man. Men who are manipulating you for their own purposes that you are willfully ignorant of. That you are willfully ignorant of. That you are being manipulated by. And every generation, they get better at it. and every generation, tools that we have given them are being used to greater and greater and greater efficacy to create the easier and easier and easier path to evil, to eschewing, to letting go of the responsibility that you have as a citizen to discern your own truth, to have conviction, to have moral clarity. Moral clarity doesn't happen because somebody told you at a pulpit, because somebody told you at a rally. That's not moral clarity. Grow up. Some of the people that voted for this, some of the people whose mentality allows them to live in a world where they think they're righteous about this, you guys know, you know better, but you're chasing, you're running from it. You're running from it. And every time that some of this, that a young mother is shot in the face, you find some excuse that is not your fault. You find some excuse to blame the victim. You find some excuse that, oh, that pastor that was fucking the secretary and raping the kids, oh, that wasn't, he was just fell from grace. He's just gotta confess and lay it all on the altar, and all will be forgiven. Because the social contract you've made with that individual is, you get to do what you do, he gets to do what he does. You guys get together every Sunday and convince yourselves that you're moral and you're righteous. Oh, and by the way, here's a politician that says all the things that you wanted to say so that it salves your conscience, so vote for him. Oh, and he'll give you a cookie too. Oh, and we're a Christian nation. Oh, and history doesn't exist. Oh, and the past doesn't exist. Oh, and those libtards. They just want their kids to poop in litter boxes in school. Oh yeah, it's our destiny to take over North America. It's our destiny to take over the Western Hemisphere. We have to. We just have to. It's your fault. You're an adult. Figure yourself out. Now, if you have figured yourself out, okay, declare it. Be a man. Be an adult. Be a woman. Declare, I am an authoritarianist. I am a Confederate sympathizer. I believe white people are superior. And I believe that God told us that we are supposed to shepherd the lesser races. Own it. So at least I know what I'm standing against. So that at least you give your enemies the courtesy of courage. Be courageous about it. That's why I don't mind all of these manipulated youths that are in the neo-fascist movements. I get it. I get it. Like, they're but by the grace of, this is going to sound weird, there but by the grace of Carl Sagan go I. Because I was on the path to that. And I am particularly susceptible to these types of manipulations, especially as a young man. They were built to take advantage of people like me. It just so happened that, honestly, because of my father and because of his investment in me and because of the fact that he allowed me to question him as an exercise because he thought he was right. He thought, yes, please debate because I know that I'm right and you're going to come to the same conclusions that I do. Because my father had the strength to do that with me. I am not a neo-Confederate. I am not. I did not live my life, the life that was prescribed for me, the life, the legacy that I eschewed. That's a whole different topic. That's a whole different video. I had to walk away from my legacy. And it was because of my father, and then because of my other father, Rocky. Many, many stories. At the end of the day, we got plenty of video. We got plenty of time. We don't have to swallow the camel today. Just here's the deal. Bottom line. Don't use your self-righteous church bullshit to hide from the consequences of your actions. Don't try to be self-righteous about the fact that the poor and the unfortunate and the angry and the principled individuals are coming to your door asking for questions. Don't be angry about that. That's on you. That's on you. And as long as we can continue to be courteous, as long as you are given courtesy, and as long as people are willing to stand in front of you and take the bullet, take the hit, take the pepper spray as an expression of our civil liberties, as a righteous execution of our civil liberties, we're going to be okay. You can retreat if you want. You can salve your wounds and put on your hood and say, oh, woe is me. How on earth could anyone decide to protest a church? You got to be more self-aware than that to have a good faith argument. And you as a citizen are required, it is your responsibility to have a good faith argument with those individuals that are antithetical to what you believe. That is what being an American is. That's what being an adult is. So grow the fuck up before you die. Some of you guys are 90 years old. You're going to start, you're all going to be facing whatever God you think is going to be facing soon. So get righteous, because you got to be honest with yourself. And you got to stop giving yourself the benefit of the doubt and stop pretending, oh, I'm not racist because self-awareness. Anyway, gird yourself with your own education. Use the tools that were given to you by anarchists such as I, who believed that if we could come up with a world where human information was universally available, human wisdom and human stupidity was universally accessible, where information and knowledge was accessible to the worst and the lowliest of us, and the smartest and the richest of us. That belief was that at least we would have the ability to have a good faith argument about our worldviews. That was the premise. The mistake was to not realize how far down the rabbit hole most of the people that we thought were good around us had gotten, and how much and to what degree they have abdicated their own responsibility in the world that they lived in. That's not civic responsibility. Anyway, educate yourself. Be passionate. Be angry. Do whatever you got to do. Be courteous in your anger. Come to the table with good faith argument. Talk. Because you don't want to fight. Because every time a fascist dictator gets fought, it don't end well for that side. It does not end well for that side. You don't understand. Read your history. Understand that authoritarian dictatorships always fall. They always fail. It just so happened that 250 years ago, a bunch of altruistic rich white men created an organization and a society whereby the rich white men could be free. And then put in a function of human enlightenment and wisdom, they put in a mechanism whereby people could be ennobled, whereby we could edit, we could change, we could adapt to the new world which our future generations would live in. There's a way to amend our Constitution. That is what we must face when this ends, when we are in the midst of the Nuremberg 2.0 trials. That's what we as citizens are going to have to face if we survive. We will need to amend the Constitution to make sure that this never happens again, to make sure that the corrupting influence of greed and money and religion and the unholy marriage of those things cannot take over our government again, cannot take over our judges again, cannot be bought again. If we survive, that's our task. And in order to do that, we got to find common ground. So when somebody starts to get angry and starts to poke at you to create that self-righteous indignation bump of endorphins, yes, put your, they're persecuting the church. Who is they, firstly? Secondarily, grow the fuck up and be self-aware before we can have that argument, before we can have that conversation, before we can have the fact that churches not paying taxes are a problem, that churches being able to manipulate politics are a problem, that corporations get the same right as a human citizen. That's a problem. That's why we got here. That's why we got here. Figure it out. We may have an opportunity to fix this if we survive, but we must eschew well, I'm going to stop. That's a statement for a different sermon. Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to share this, and I just appreciate being free. I appreciate that I can do this, and I appreciate that I have been taught the courage that in these times when there could very well be consequences to sharing these kinds of things, because the boogeyman of my youth is now in power. The Heritage Foundation is now in power, and they have a tendency, and they are very well versed, believe me. These religious institutions, these political religious institutions are vicious. But sometimes you gotta say what you are. So there it is. And I hope that we can come together. I hope that I can learn from other people's experiences. I hope that we can have a good faith argument. Anyway, I'll shut up. Thank you. Hopefully talk to you later.